Welcome back to City Scene. You know, we've got Chief Aiden with us today. And Chief, how are you?
Fabulous. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. Appreciate you coming on the show. You know, I know you're all about community-oriented policing and reaching out. And we were talking a couple months ago about this, and I thought it'd be a good opportunity to talk on City Scene about how to interact with the police. I know you guys are out there and trying to interact with folks, and I grew up with my father always saying, you know, when you get pulled over, be polite, make sure you have your hands up like on the wheel so that, you know, a police officer can see in the mirror. Well, what kind of advice would you give to folks as officers interact with them? How should people respond? What should they do? What kind of things would help out you guys?
Well, that's the most common interaction with your police department is a traffic stop in terms of an actual stop. Hopefully we're changing culture where police officers come up and have voluntary conversations with people, which we're seeing that in Center City and other units. But primarily, you know, a lot of people's first contact is when the blue lights come on behind you, you're getting pulled over, it's a stressful time.
Yeah.
And for people need to know that those things are routine.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon, sir.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, and you?
Doing fine, thank you. Officer Sawyer with the Greenville Police Department.
Okay.
The reason why I stopped you is for the stop sign violation back there. You eased through the stop sign, you didn't come to a complete stop.
Our officers
Yes,
are trained that when they come up to your car, they introduce themselves and they tell you the reason why you were stopped. That's in our policy. That's what we want them to do because that takes away a lot of the questions and it lowers the anxiety level of that entire encounter. From the police perspective, traffic stops are one of the most dangerous things that we do. A lot of police violent actions against police officers initiate from traffic stops. A lot of times officers will stop a car for a traffic violation, but they don't know that that person or persons in that car have committed a much more serious violation, a robbery, a shooting. You just don't know. Right. So they're on guard, and their anxiety level is up. So by complying with their request after they introduce themselves, they will likely ask you for your driver's license and registration, and in some cases proof of insurance. So when you hand over the documents, the officers at that point are going to go back to their car. But here's a critical piece. At that point, you're not free to leave. You're not under arrest, but you're not free to leave until that encounter is completed, either through a citation or a warning. And those are the two resolutions for that.
I probably want to make sure that I've got my driver's license back before I take off anyway.
Absolutely, absolutely. But just, you know, from a legal perspective, you are not free to leave, but you're not under arrest.
Gotcha.
So that's a place where you're not being detained. It's a traffic stop. It's sort of a business. It's a business transaction at that point. And so the officers go back. They will run your license. They will either write a citation, and we do that automated. It's automated, so it's pretty quick. At which point whatever their decision is, they have discretion. They'll come back. They will either issue the citation or tell you that they've given you a warning, and sometimes the warning can be written. But at the end of that encounter, they will give you your driver's license back. At that point, you are free to leave.
Okay.
Any request from the police side to do any further searches on the car have to be voluntary at that point. There'll be consent searches.
So they'll ask you if they can look into something.
Do you mind if I look at your car? Or, you know, do you mind if I search your car? That is not a consensual encounter if they're still holding on to your driver's license. That driver's license has to be given back to you, and at that point, the encounter's over. The consensual piece comes after that has been clearly delineated, and officers are very well trained in this, and they do this every day.
Gotcha.
So then the traffic stop is over. Generally, traffic stops will take from 5 to 10 minutes, depending on the seriousness of the violation, how many violations you're going to get, and if there's any issues with the data coming back on our computers. But that's the ins and out of a traffic stop. The only other advice that I would give people is do not exit your car, do not come out of your car unless the officer asks you to do that. And they can do that. They might ask if there's loud music and people moving around in the car. They may decide to separate the occupants. But that's really it. It's really a lot of common sense, and a successful traffic stop requires politeness and a positive attitude by both people. And by positive attitude, I don't mean it'd be cheery. It's not good to get a ticket. It never makes you feel good. But a positive attitude and understanding that the officer's doing his or her job and that they're going to treat you with dignity and respect.
But I think it's important to note what you had mentioned at the very beginning. It's a stressful time for the person getting pulled over. But because so many things happen or so many bad things start out in that situation, it's also stressful for police officers. So that's good for folks to keep that in mind as well. Everyone be calm and happy and, well, as happy as you can be. Like
as happy as you can be, but you know, it's a job. We do have an increased focus at my direction in terms of traffic safety. Part of that is increased dosages of enforcement, which means traffic stops, as well as public awareness.
Now, that's not the only interaction, obviously, besides going to nice events. There's sometimes when you may be standing around on the street or something like that, and a police officer would approach you. We've got the Center City unit that's out there a lot, and meeting and greeting, talking to folks. How do those interactions take place? What goes on with those?
There's a few different types of interactions. So the first one would be a consensual stop. So I come up to you and say, hey, how are you? I'm Officer so-and-so. I patrol this area. Do you live here? Are you visiting someone, especially if they don't know you, or, you know, so it starts off that way. At that point, there is no requirement for you to stay. You can say, no, thanks, officer, have a nice day, and leave. That's a voluntary stop. Or you can say, oh, you know, I'm visiting my grandmother here, I'm so-and-so, and that's that interaction. There's an investigative stop. So if I have reasonable suspicion, which is more than a hunch based on my training and experience that criminal activity has or is about to occur, and that you're the perpetrator of that, I can detain you.
So if you see things that kind of send off little red flags in your head of potentially suspicious activity.
Absolutely. Like, for instance, if it's an area known for an open air drug market, we see buyers coming through, we see a suspicious transaction, that's an investigative stop at that point. You know, you keep going to a little stash over here and coming back, and you're looking around, and when you see the police, your hands go into your pocket, one comes out. Things that increase those things based on my training experience, I'm going to conduct an investigative stop. Right. At that point, you're not under arrest, but you're not free to leave either. Until that stop is concluded. So that's one where I don't automatically get to search you. I've got to get a little further for that in terms of my, I've got to get to probable cause in order to do a full search of you. But I can do what's called Terry v. Ohio, so a frisk. And that's basically a pat down on the outer clothing to make sure that you don't have any weapons. And if the investigative stop is for a suspected drug transaction, then you're not too far off from under Terry v. Ohio being able to do a pat down. But all of those have to be articulated by the officer based on his or her training and experience and the situation that they encounter at that point.
Okay, or if there's I guess another scenario would be like if there was a break-in and someone had called 911, said, oh, I saw this person leaving somebody's house, and then if you're standing there nearby with the same kind of clothing description, things like that, it'd be reasonable for a police officer to come up and talk to you.
That's an investigative stop, and same thing until it's determined that it's not you, and for a reasonable period of time. An investigative stop, you know, at most is going to be 10 to 15 minutes. If you're beyond that, it's, you know, really you're at probable cause and you are in a position to make an arrest.
Okay.
So they're not long. They're not meant to inconvenience the public, but they are meant to allow law enforcement to really peel back the layers and determine what they've got.
Okay, so that's the first two. I'm guessing the third one goes even further.
It's arrest. The third one's arrest, and at that point you have to have probable cause, which is a preponderance of evidence that you are the one that committed a crime.
Right. Okay.
So it's a preponderance. It's you know, not enough to convict, but it's enough to, you know, be able to take someone, place them under arrest to a magistrate, explain your reasons to the magistrate for believing that this person conducted or this person broke the law, whatever that law is, and the magistrate decides whether that's enough probable cause or not to make an arrest. So it's really pretty straightforward.
Right.
You know, and I want to clarify something. You know, there's been a lot on the news about New York City and the stop and frisk. That is not at all what we're talking about here. The stop and frisk are two mutually exclusive activities of the police. They don't go together. I can stop you doesn't necessarily give me a right to search you.
Until you get to that level where you've got more probable cause or reasonable cause.
Or reasonable suspicion.
Reasonable suspicion.
I can stop you, like for instance, I can stop you for a traffic stop.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't give me, as a police officer, automatically a right to search you.
Right.
So those are two things that people, like I'm often asked, well, what about the stop and frisk? What about the stop and frisk? We don't do stop and frisk like New York does.
Right.
All of ours is broken down. There's a reason to stop. Then to escalate that, the search part of it, the Fourth Amendment part of it, is different.
So I imagine that goes along with the idea once you got the probable cause, the officer's probably going to tell you what's going on and here's why I'm about to frisk you then.
Absolutely.
Right.
If time allows. I mean, there are in some circumstances, there might be a very strong indication that you are carrying a weapon.
Like if I start to slowly move my hand down while we're talking and
at
you've
that
already got
point-
some suspicions then.
At that point, they don't necessarily have to communicate that to you, but eventually, all police officers will tell you what they're doing and why they're doing it. I'm going to pat you down for weapons. It gets more complicated. If there's
I imagine it would because
does.
we're only talking about a couple of things, but I imagine you guys encounter hundreds of scenarios and each one's just a little bit different.
there's a plain frisk for drug clause. So if that officer is conducting that weapons pat down, if they feel something that, for instance, with crack cocaine, a bag, you can sort of hear and feel that with what feels like rocks in there, you can actually go in there and pull that out, although that search began as a Terry v. Ohio stop or a...
So it started with reasonable cause, but now all this what was it?
Reasonable suspicion.
Reasonable suspicion, and then all of a sudden once you feel that rock, then it becomes probable cause.
Well, it's still under that reasonable suspicion, but it allows you to go in there and get that out. Just like if you felt something like, that felt like a knife or a small firearm. So it really, this is why we have, a lot of attorneys around this, and this is why cases end up going to the Supreme Court.
Right.
There's a lot of variations. The best that we can do is train our officers in such a way that they are updated on laws, the changes in the laws, and all the different nuances, and also a mentality and strategies of our police department. We do not want to abuse our right to interact with the public and unnecessarily or unlawfully search people.
Right.
What I have found since I've been here in Greenville is there was a lot of talk of the stop and frisk. It was mentioned in the same way that we just discussed it. It was one encounter. And I've been working to really train the community and teach the community that these things they're different. They don't come together.
Right.
You get one and then the other. And I continue to do that work and explain it because I think a lot of times they need to know, the community needs to know, and the police officers need to know that there's a standard here and we operate with that standard. And that standard is not what people saw in New York City. I don't want to comment on that. That's in the courts.
Right.
But we do not practice the stop and frisk like what has been described in New York's condition.
And it sounds like you do a lot of training to make sure your officers know what to do and when you can do different things, so we don't have to have issues with people thinking that this stuff's gone wrong.
Absolutely.
That's good. Okay. Is there a phone number people could call for more information about things like that within the police department? Anyone they can turn to for that stuff?
They can call our criminal investigations, and if there's cases that they think are questionable, they can call our internal affairs. And both of those are on our website. So if you go to the city's website, go to the police, you can find both numbers on there.
Outstanding. Chief, thank you
Excellent.
much.
Thank you.